You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the vanishing and reappearance of Katherine Van Alst. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's yo-yo experience.
Katherine Van Alst was an 8-year-old little girl from Kansas City in Missouri who, in the June of 1946, for the first time with her parents and her 2 brothers, visited the mountains of Devil's Den State Park, which is nestled quite nicely in Lee Creek Valley in the United States. And then, on the Sunday of the 16th of June, Katherine Van Alst decided to wander off away from her brothers and father while they were playing near a creek, and then simply vanished. When her 2 brothers, along with her father, realised that their adventurous sister had gone on a lone walkabout, they then ran back to their holiday home, which then triggered an immediate family search party. However, despite the helpless cries of her family, who were desperately trying to find their daughter, young Katherine failed to respond. So the park officials were then contacted, and a very, very robust search for the missing 8-year-old commenced. However, with the entirety of the Devil's Den State Park covering over 2,500 acres, the search soon became virtually aimless. But on the 6th day of the search, and just as all hope for Katherine Van Alst's survival began to fade, on the Saturday of the 22nd of June, a small voice responded to the loud calls. And at last, about 7 miles from where she originally disappeared from, Katherine Van Alst had finally been found. And when she was asked about how she managed to stray so far from her family's campsite and remain missing for nearly a week, she simply replied, and I quote,
"I just couldn't find it."
Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this bewildering episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes, and not only am I a medium, a paranormal investigator and a true crime buff, but I am also a man who believes that you have 2 parts to your brain, a left and right. On the left, I'll say that again, a left and a right. On the left side there is nothing right, and in the right side there is nothing left. But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, and that I don't always screw up my jokes, every Tuesday, or every week, Tuesday, mainly on a Tuesday night, though occasionally on a Wednesday, allowing for bank holidays and extra busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, the darker side of some past celebrities, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of the episode subject that I can reply to, a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the reappearing story surrounding the vanishing and reappearance of Katherine Van Alst. And this week's necessary disclaimer: this story is a tale that involves details of a missing person, mainly a young 8-year-old girl, so it may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. I don't know what my problem is, but whatever it is, I bet it's pretty damn hard to pronounce. But anyway, let's get back to the story. According to Wikipedia, The Devil's Den State Park is a 2,500-acre Arkansas state park in Washington County near West Fork, Arkansas in the United States. The park was originally built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the beginning of 1933, which was a voluntary government work relief program that ran from 1933 to 1942. Devil's Den State Park is in the Lee Creek Valley in the Boston Mountains, which are on the southwestern part of the Ozarks, which are otherwise known as the Ozark Mountains. The park itself has an 8-acre Civilian Conservation Corps-built lake, which is open all year round for recreation and includes things like trails for hiking, mountain biking and horseback riding, along with several picnicking areas, a swimming pool and cabins, with campsites ranging from modern to primitive. The rocks around the region of the Devil's Den State Park are essentially little disturbed flat-lying sedimentary layers of the Paleozoic age, which is from the Paleozoic era and is the first of 3 geological eras of the Phanerozoic eon that began some 538.8 million years ago. The park's caves, ravines and crevices were partly formed by the slippage in sandstone formations, with the Devil's Icebox being one of the most visited caves in the park, being named due to the cool air that rushes through it. However, due to the spread of white nose syndrome, which is a fungal infection caused by the fungus in bats, the park's caves have been temporarily closed to the public since the 16th of April in 2010 to help slow its spread. Now, let's go back to the June of 1946 and the Van Alst family, consisting of Mum, Dad, John Van Alst, the 2 boys and 1 girl, decide to take a family fun trip to the Devil's Den State Park. One day, on the Sunday of the 16th of June, the 3 children, along with their father, whilst they were near the campsite, decide to go and play by a nearby creek, with the 2 boys taking their children's fishing sets and the 8-year-old Katherine changing into her bathing suit. And so, whilst the 4 family members were down at the creek, their father helped his 2 boys to set up their fishing sets, while his daughter Katherine at some point wandered off and seemingly vanished, with her father and her 2 brothers apparently being right next to her. They looked away for just a second, only to find that when they looked back, she had disappeared. It was originally thought by her father and her 2 brothers that she had just gone back to the campsite, which was literally just a stone's throw away, and so there was no reason for any alarm at this point. As time went on and the realisation set in, the family grew concerned regarding the whereabouts of their 8-year-old daughter Katherine, so Mum and Dad, along with her 2 brothers, started their own household search party, constantly calling out her name. However, there was no sight nor sound of her anywhere. And as they continued searching the woods and campsite with no joy as to her whereabouts, the panicked family then noticed the park officials, and an organised large-scale search party for her began. At the time of Katherine Van Alst's disappearance, the 8-year-old was wearing nothing more than just a bathing suit, so not only was she highly and dangerously exposed to all the elements, but she was also at high risk of being harmed in a variety of ways, as the Devil's Den State Park is occupied by a dense population of wildlife, various forms of rocks and cliffs, and is complete with all the makings of nature in its unrepentant form. So, as the search party began, so did all the hope of finding young Katherine safe and sound. However, the expectation of her safe recovery was rapidly fading as the next few days went by, and everyone kept asking themselves and each other, how does a mere child of 8 years old wander off into nothingness while she is also in the immediate company of her own family? After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at the continuing search for Katherine Van Alst and her surprise reappearance.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could, and has, taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
Park officials, along with many other volunteers, launched a meticulously methodical search for the young 8-year-old by exploring the entire area of the Devil's Den State Park for several square miles, with every moment that went by being seen as a crucial moment, since the girl was barefoot and dressed in nothing but a bathing suit, which is hardly the sort of clothing that was appropriate for being stuck out in the thick, dense forest. The search for the search for the missing Katherine Van Alst went on tirelessly for 6 days, with no sign of the missing girl and all hope starting to fade. Until, that is, when one of the search party members, a Peter Chaddick, was near one of the park caves when he suddenly heard a small fragile voice respond to one of his calls, which said, and I quote,
"Here I am."
The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at the time reported that Peter Chaddick, who was one of the search party volunteers in the forest while passing the caves, suddenly noticed little Katherine Van Alst appear out from one of these caves and start to casually wave at him. And so it was confirmed that, after 6 days of continual searching through the dense terrain of the Devil's Den State Park, Katherine Van Alst had finally been found, about 7 miles away from her family's campsite. According to those search volunteers who were there when the missing 8-year-old was found, she was both extremely spookily calm and almost in a daze, with the searchers also reporting that the child was covered in various insect bites and that she was still wearing the bathing suit that she had on at the time of her disappearance. But Luckily, little Katherine suffered no serious injury or malnourishment and managed to sustain herself on berries and drank from small water deposits that were located throughout the territory. And when one of the volunteers asked her how she managed to stray so far from her family's campsite and remain missing for nearly a week, she simply replied, and I quote,
"I just couldn't find it."
Katherine Van Alst's father, John Van Alst, had been inexhaustibly searching for his daughter for 3 long days with the rest of the search and rescue volunteers when the local sheriff told him that he needed to stop and take a break, which would explain why he didn't hear about his daughter's remarkable recovery until the next day, when one of his associates noticed a morning newspaper clipping reporting that she had at last been found, and unfortunately the local law enforcement had been unable to reach him. However, all was not lost, as a newspaper called the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reported that the little girl, and I quote,
"Gave her haggard daddy a big hug and kiss"
upon their reunion. Once the 8-year-old Katherine Van Alst and had been reunited with her family and the various health checks were completed, people started to ask themselves a lot of questions regarding her ordeal. Her first question was, how did this little girl manage to travel some 7 air miles away, meaning as the crow flies of course, and end up 600 feet higher than the place where she had originally disappeared from? You see, this meant that this 8-year-old small child had walked an estimated 30 miles whilst weaving through the forest in order to get where she was found. And when I say weaving, I mean that she would have had one heck of a battle with the combating harsh, steep, treacherous wilderness terrain while dressed only in her bathing suit and bare feet. And of course, let us also not forget that amongst this steep, treacherous wilderness terrain are various types of rocks, thick forest, steep hills, and not so pleasant wild animals. So the big question that authorities were asking was, how could she have managed to cover that distance in 6 days through this challenging landscape in barefoot? At the time Katherine Van Alst was found, her feet were described as swollen, and she was covered with insect bites and scratches from various thorny, tangled shrubs and vines. So it was very apparent that she had done some wandering. However, she also didn't seem to be in nearly as a poor condition as one would have expected if she had covered a 30-mile distance. In fact, it was pointed out at the time that even a properly equipped adult would have had a tough time navigating through that sort of terrain. It was also pointed out that the 8-year-old seemed to be both in a better condition than one would have expected from her ordeal, and that the cave she was in just so happened to have a freshwater spring. But despite her various cuts and bruises, which was to be expected, she was in reasonably good shape. And one other strange thing about this whole missing person case was that the place where she was found, i.e. the caves, had already been thoroughly searched by aircraft and tracker dogs twice without having found any trace of her. So we ask ourselves, how and why did she just suddenly appear in the cave? And how and why had she been so remarkably calm after such a frightening ordeal? I'm going to take a short break from the Katherine Van Alst story and to take us up to the second short break with details of the work done by David Paulides and his study that involves missing people under strange circumstances. Well, according to Wikipedia, David Paulides is a former police officer who is now an investigator and writer, known primarily for his books dedicated to not only proving the reality of Bigfoot, but also establishing the missing 411 conspiracy theory. In his online biography page, David Paulides... My mouse went sway off then. On his online biography page, David Paulides states that he received his undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of San Francisco, and in 1977 he began a 20-year career in law enforcement, and in 1980 he transferred to the San Jose Police Department, working in the patrol division on the SWAT team and the street crime unit, along with a variety of other assignments in the detective division. After leaving the police force, David Paulides wrote books on both the topic of Bigfoot as well as on the disappearances of people in national parks and elsewhere, which he attributes to unspecified unknown causes. Following all his work on the Bigfoot phenomena, David Paulides' next project was the Missing 411 series of self-published books, along with 3 documentary films so far, documenting unsolved cases of people who have gone missing in national parks and elsewhere. According to David Paulides, his work on this subject of missing people began when he was doing research in a national park when an unnamed off-duty park ranger approached him and expressed concern about the questionable nature of some of the missing person cases which occurred in the parks. Paulides obliged, and when he had broadened his investigation to include missing people from across the world, this led to his belief that he has uncovered a mysterious series of worldwide disappearances which he said defied logical and conventional explanations. As of the August of 2021, David Paulides has written at least 10 books on the missing 411 phenomena, and as of the time of writing this podcast, he does not yet have a theory on what is causing these strange disappearances, although he does indicate that the, and I quote, field of suspects is narrowing, with him advising his readers to go outside their normal comfort zone in order to help determine who the culprits for these strange disappearances are. The interest in the 411 Missing Book series has prompted so far the creation of 3 documentary films that include Missing 411 from 2017, Missing 411 The Hunted from 2019, and Missing 411 The UFO Connection from 2022. And on a personal note regarding these documentaries, I watched all 3 when they were available on Amazon Prime, and they are truly mind-blowing. After this second short break, in part 3 we will look at the work that David Paulides did on the Katherine Van Alst case and some of the theories as to what may or may not have happened to her.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk. Or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
According to the missing person researcher David Paulides, who you no doubt remember is the author of the aforementioned Missing 411 series of self-published books, there were several peculiarities that rose when law enforcement actually spoke to the young 8-year-old Katherine Van Alst. First up was her claim that she had very little recollection about the 6 days that she had been missing, simply stating that she had been eating berries and, in order to stay alive, she suddenly found herself in a cave. David Paulides has also mentioned that the area that she was lost in was overgrown with many types of poisonous berries, so that for her to choose the right type of berry to eat without getting some sort of bellyache has been seen as kind of curious, especially for an 8-year-old little girl who had no real outdoor or wilderness hiking experience. Young Katherine Van Alst has also been reported to have made some other supposedly unusual remarks by explaining that when she had gone missing, she had simply been unable to find her campsite of her father and brothers, despite the fact that, for a short time at least, she was right near them. But not only that, she would also claim that on several occasions she had shouted out to the people searching for her, but for whatever reason they had apparently been unable to hear her. And on top of that, young Katherine also said that she had seen the tracker dogs, but that she had been too afraid to approach them. And according to David Paulides, she also made a strange statement of how she slept in, and I quote,
warm grass,
and on the first night that she went missing, without any elaboration on what this cryptic warm grass statement meant. There is no doubt that the vanishing and reappearance of Katherine Van Alst is an odd case, if nothing else, with researchers who have started looking into tales of folklore and legends in the wilderness, one day hoping to help with the clues that might actually explain this strange occurrence. One such legend that stood out was the Irish tale of the stray sod. In contemporary fantasy literature, a stray sod is a clump of grass enchanted by fairies, and if a person steps on one, they will become disorientated and lost, even if they are in familiar surroundings. The way to combat or break the enchantment of a stray sod is by wearing an item of clothing inside out, which allows the person to find their way home again. The concept and phrase stray sod appear to originate in ancient Celtic mythology, specifically Irish folklore. But in more modern Christianised interpretations, the source of the enchantment may not be fairies. And in other writings and in speech, the phrase stepped on a stray sod can be used metaphorically to denote even a sudden, unexpected or inexplicable disorientation. Stray sods appear in the children's fantasy book series called the Spiderwick Chronicles Disorientating Travellers, with the companion guide to the series noting that in order to reverse the effects of a stray sod, one must either have bread in his or her pocket or turn their clothes inside out. Other theories regarding Katherine Van Alst's odd happening include that she was maybe lured away from the family by a strange and unexplained force, and that she was possibly even carried and taken care of to where she was found by some form of entity which could have been anything from fairies to Bigfoot or even part of an alien abduction. Also, much has been made of the fact that this area of the Devil's Den State Park was that it was once feared as a place of spirits by the local tribes, and that there is a connection between these spirits and Katherine's disappearance. There has, of course, been a fair amount of criticism as to how the Katherine Van Alst case has been presented over the years, and that the more, shall we say, embellished elements of the story may have been emphasised to make it more interesting or mysterious than it actually was. But however you look at it, the fact that this 8-year-old little girl in nothing but a swimsuit and bare feet was actually found alive after nearly a week in the jungles and wilds of the Devil's Den State Park is a story that will always have room for many discussions, debates and conspiracies for many years to come. But whatever happened to her over those 6 days will probably always remain a mystery.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 150, we are going to be looking at the disappearance of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. Glenn and Bessie Hyde were newlyweds who disappeared while attempting to run the rapids of the Colorado River through Grand Canyon, Arizona in 1928. Had the couple succeeded, Bessie Hyde would have been the first woman known to accomplish this feat. However, still to this day, the whereabouts of the couple remain unknown, and they are still classified as missing.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names and places, of course, were mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you do know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. No AI was used or harmed in the making of this or any other episode of Mark's Unexplained World. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.